Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzhak speaking to you from south of Jerusalem here in the land of Israel, the beautiful land of Israel, the holy land of Israel, the promised land, promised to the people of Israel, promised to our forefathers Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, promised to the children of Israel when they left Egypt. And we just left Egypt 1 week ago when we celebrated Passover, which concluded here in Israel just last evening. Today is the 22nd day of the month of Nisan. The year is 5784. It's April 30th, 2024. And today is 7 days, which are 1 week of the Omer. And yes, here in Israel, we just last evening concluded the 7-day festival of Passover, festival which commemorates and encourages us to relive the exodus from Egypt, because we were there. We left. We were amongst those that painted the blood of the Lamb on the doorposts and were taken out of Egypt by Hashem. We were the ones who just yesterday being the anniversary, the 7th day of Passover, Shvi Shel Passover is the anniversary of the 7th. It's the 7th day of Passover, and it's the anniversary of the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, the greatest miracle, perhaps, in all history. So we are fresh out of Egypt. We are feeling the freedom and ready to move on. And yes, we are today the 7th day, 1 week of the counting of the Omer. And of course, the Omer we began counting on the 2nd day of Passover, the day following the Seder night. It was a day that the barley offering was made in the Holy Temple by the Kohanim. And that's the day we begin counting, and we count 7 full weeks. Each day, with a blessing, we make the count. And the 50th day following those 7 full weeks, which come out to 49 days, the 50th day, of course, is the holiday of Shavuot, a holiday in which we received and will receive every year, and in fact receive every day, the Holy Torah. So, fresh out of Egypt, and we are growing and working on ourselves, improving ourselves. We know that when Israel left Egypt, they had been in Egypt for a few hundred years. They had been enslaved. They had become very assimilated. They had spiritually were in a state of tremendous impurity. And Hashem basically took them out at the last minute. Not a moment too soon, because had they stayed any longer, they might have become irredeemably impure. They would have been so submerged in impurity that they would have become hopeless. So Hashem took Israel out just in the nick of time, but before Israel could receive the Torah, they needed to work their way out and up from the great tum'ah, from the great spiritual impurity that they had endured in Egypt. And so those 49 days were days that Israel slowly, day after day, its spiritual status increased and raised upward until finally they were fit to stand at Sinai and receive the Torah. And we too have our own Egyptian servitude that we all need to leave, whatever it is, whatever personal things we have that are holding us back. The word Mitzrayim, Egypt, in Hebrew, is spelled the same way as the word Mitzarim, which means narrow places, straits, confinements. And when we're confined, we're not free. And we have all sorts of things, hang-ups and stumbling blocks, personal things, sometimes within ourselves, sometimes within the outside world, that we have to overcome and work our way through. And this is the time to really focus on it, get ourselves free, get ourselves fit and ready to receive the Torah. And so we come out of Passover, like a racer coming out of the gate, full steam ahead, and the finish line, the first finish line will be Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, on the 50th day. And yes, we are now 6 weeks away because we've already completed 1 week of the counting of the Omer. In the meantime, there's so many other things going on. I haven't even mentioned yet that this coming Shabbat, we are reading Parshat Acharei Mot from the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 1, concludes chapter 18, verse 30, Acharei Mot, after the death of the two sons of Aaron, who we read about their untimely, shocking death 3 weeks ago, or maybe 4 weeks ago. And then the book of Leviticus took a bit of a detour, went on a tangent, as it were, and we talked about all sorts of issues of impurity, of tsarat, that skin ailment that is most always poorly translated as leprosy, which it is not. And we talked about that a lot. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. And then that was Tazria, Parshat Tazria, and that was followed by Parshat Metzorah, which also went on and on about the tsarat and about other impurities that people could contract that were less of an issue today because we don't have the Mikdash, we don't have the Holy Temple. But when the Holy Temple is rebuilt, we will have to very seriously deal with these issues again, and we will. And then last week, of course, it was Pesach. So the Torah reading on Shabbat was a Torah reading that was special for Pesach. So really, it's been about a month since we read about the death of Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Avihu, and now finally the Torah is returning to that story, as it were, because it's just mentioning. It's sort of the starting point of this week's Parshat Acharei Mot, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. But I also would like to mention that this coming Shabbat is Shabbat Mevarachim, meaning that it's the Shabbat that we make a special blessing for the upcoming new month of Iyar, which will be next week, beginning next week, the evening of May 8th. It's a two-day Rosh Chodesh, so it's the evening of May 8th, followed by the evening of May 9th, and concluding in the day of May 10th. And so a lot of things going on. And in the week following that, of course, is Israel's Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day, and Yom HaAtzmaut, Independence Day, which we'll talk about at length next week. It's going to be a very, very difficult time for us here in Israel because of all the death, all the tragic death, whether of citizens or of soldiers that have occurred this past half year. And it's going to be it's always a difficult time because the Memorial Day is followed immediately by Independence Day. So there's always this very jarring change of mood from somber and sad to joyful and glad. But this year it's going to be exceedingly difficult because of all that we're going through. And let's talk about that for just a few minutes. Yes, Israel is still poised to go into the most southern Gazan city of Rafah, also known as Rafiah, and it still hasn't done it, and still these negotiations with Hamas, which are not going to get anywhere, and if they do, it's only because Israel decides to cave and give them all they want and back away and basically lose the war. God forbid. I hope that doesn't happen. I'm getting very impatient myself. The United States is just making life miserable for Israel, despite the military support. They are just providing every stumbling block in the world, and now there's a threat that the International Crimes Court, located in The Hague, is going to open up a case against Israel and possibly outlaw our Prime Minister and our leading defense minister and leading generals, so that if they leave Israel and go to any country that's part of the International Crimes Court, they could be arrested. And I just read from a very, very, very reliable source here in Israel, Amit Segal, a very reliable source, that the ICC, the International Crimes Court, only is proceeding with this because the Biden administration gave them the green light. Basically, the UN, and apparently with the help of the United States, is trying to make Israel illegal, make it illegal for Israel to defend itself, which in terms makes it illegal for Israel to exist. It's a pretty sad situation for the world. And of course, if Biden is trying to ingratiate himself with those wacko university students and their terrorist leaders, cheerleaders, and leaders, and terrorist professors, and brainless idiots, if he's trying to ingratiate himself with them and get their votes, he's selling not only Israel down the river, but he's selling the soul of America in order to grab some votes of people who are calling for genocide. It's pretty sick. It's a pretty sick situation, and I'm pretty disgusted by it all. But I did hear something yesterday. A rabbi said this. He said, God could have taken Israel out of Egypt in a moment, in an instant, just like he created the world, just simply by speaking, saying a word, and the world's created. Said light, and there's light. So why did he mess around with Pharaoh? Why all this back and forth, give and take with Pharaoh? Like, what Pharaoh is his equal? God forbid, no. So why is he wasting his time, as it were, wasting our time? And then, of course, even after Pharaoh finally tells Israel to go, no sooner does he tell Israel to go than a few days after Israel's left, he changes his mind and comes pursuing Israel in order to annihilate Israel. And basically, a similar thing happened when Israel was in exile, the Babylonian exile, after the destruction of the first temple, when King Cyrus, Koresh, we say in Hebrew, King Cyrus made his famous declaration that the Jews could go back to Jerusalem and build a temple. A wonderful thing. Great guy. But then he backtracked and said, no, you can't. And so it took many decades for Israel to finally be able to build a temple. So Koresh, also similar to Pharaoh, said, go, do it, do what you want, worship your God, and then said, no, you can't. So this rabbi said something very interesting. He said, if Pharaoh had just said, go, you have my blessing, go, do what you need to do, he said, then we would have built a temple, and it would have had a big, on the donor wall or whatever, had a big name of Pharaoh, big commemoration to Pharaoh. He's a great guy. We love Pharaoh. And he said we would have adopted the ways of the Egyptians because Pharaoh was such a nice guy and he helped us and he set us free. And so we would have adopted their ways. We wouldn't have rejected their ways. We wouldn't have received the Torah because we wouldn't have rejected their ways. We'd still be immersed in a world of Avodah Zarah, a world of idolatry. And he said the same thing with the second temple. If Koresh hadn't have changed his mind and turned his back on us, we would have, the second temple, instead of the temple of Solomon, which was the first temple, the temple of Cyrus. And, Babylon was the Jews did well in Babylon. That's why not many Jews went back to Israel, to Jerusalem, to build the second temple. So, we would have assimilated again and taken on the ways of the Babylonians. And he said a very similar thing happened in our current situation, where at the beginning of the war, Joe Biden was, in our corner, supporting us, and very supportive, emotionally supportive, and with diplomatic support and military support and financial support and support in every which way. And then a month or so into the war, he turned his back on Israel And yeah, he still supports, but he doesn't. Yes and no. It's a very, very sadistic thing he's doing, which is, he supports Israel's right to defend itself, but not Israel's right to be on the offensive. And in order to destroy Hamas, we need to be on the offensive. In order to respond as we should respond to Iran after their attack, we need to be on the offensive. And he is doing everything in his power to prevent that. So the rabbi said it's the same thing. If Biden hadn't turned his back on us, then we'd be in love with America and be wanting to be like America. He said, this is how Hashem works. He does this to us so that we know which way we need to go, and know we need to work with Hashem, and know we need to stick with the Torah, and not to be tempted into any other type of lifestyle or belief system or way of living that we're a nation that dwells alone. We know that. And so, yes, we've had many leaders throughout the history who have done wonderful things, life-saving things for Israel, and then turned around and did horrible things to Israel. So this is a pattern that we've been through many times, but it was very interesting how he brought that experience of leaving Egypt right up into the present. And this is Hashem works with a purpose. It's not for naught that Joe Biden supported Israel and now doesn't support Israel. It's all part of the bigger picture, part of the bigger plan. So as frustrating as it is, we have to go along with Hashem's plan. He's in charge. He's the only one, and he is one, the only one who will pull us through. He's the only one who is our guardian, our defender, our protector. And we'll stick with Hashem and the King of Kings, right? And all you earthly kings, you don't impress us. One day you support us, the next day you don't. You want to outlaw us, you'll outlaw us. My only prayer is that our own leaders muster up the courage and the strength and the trust in Hashem in order to carry on our battle and not let the threats of the world sway us, because we really have no choice. This is a war that was forced upon us, and it's a war that we must win unequivocally. And anything less than that is only going to bring upon us more trouble and more tragedy, God forbid. So that is the update in the situation here in Israel. And now let's talk a little bit about the Parshat Acharei Mot. We'll read the first few verses in Hebrew, then in English. We are in the book of Leviticus, chapter 16, verse 1. Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe Acharei Mot shnei bnei Aharon בקרבתם לפני השם וימותו. ויאמר השם אל משה דבר אל אהרון אחיך ואל יבוא בכל עת אל הקודש מבית לפרוכת אל פני הכפורת אשר על הארון ולא ימות כי בענן אראה על הכפורת. בזאת יבוא אהרון אל הקודש בפר בן בקר לחטאת ואל לעולה כתונת בד קודש ילבש, ומכנסי בד יהיו על בשרו, ובאבנית בד יחגור, ובמצנפת בד יצנוף בגדי קודש הם, ורחץ במים את בשרו ולבשם. Hashem spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's two sons, when they approached before Hashem and they died. And Hashem said to Moshe, speak to Aaron your brother. He shall not come at all times into the sanctuary within the curtain, in front of the cover that is upon the ark, so that he should not die. For in a cloud will I appear upon the ark cover. With this shall Aaron come into the sanctuary, with a young bull for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall don a sacred tunic, linen tunic. Linen breeches shall be upon his flesh. He shall gird himself with a linen sash, and cover his head with a linen turban. They are sacred vestments. He shall immerse himself in water and then don them. From the assembly of the children of Israel he shall take 2 he-goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering. What the Torah is beginning to describe, and it continues to describe this over the next number of verses, is the service, the avodah of Yom Kippur. So this service, which is a service of atonement, right? We make atonement on Yom Kippur. We come clean with Hashem on Yom Kippur. It would seem to be that it's in response to the death of the 2 sons of Aaron, because that seems to be what kicks the whole thing off here. And of course, the warning that Hashem gives to Aaron, that he shouldn't just go in at any time into the Holy of Holies, which is where the ark is, unless Hashem specifically says, is so that he won't die like his sons died. Basically, he's saying, your sons took a liberty that wasn't theirs to take, and it cost them their lives, and I'm warning you now that you must be very, very careful. And of course, as we know, Yom Kippur is the one day of the year that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is allowed and commanded to enter into the Holy of Holies, where he goes in with an incense pan and places the burning incense on the foundation stone in front of the Aron, in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and then exits. In the second temple, of course, there was no Ark of the Covenant, so he would simply place it on the foundation stone. But we learn all about, in this week's parasha, we learn all about the scapegoats, about all the details of the service on Yom Kippur in the Holy Temple, which was, the service was performed in full by the Kohen Gadol, by the high priest, and it began at the very moment that Yom Kippur began in the evening, and did not conclude until the very, very last moment, that when Yom Kippur concluded the next evening. And the Kohen Gadol was busy the entire time, over 24 hours of the day of Yom Kippur. He would prepare by studying in the weeks preceding Yom Kippur each year, so that it would all be fresh in his mind. And of course, everything had to be performed precisely and at the right speed, because there was so much to do. It was a huge task. And of course, all of Israel's eyes were on the Kohen Gadol, and all of Israel's prayers were with the Kohen Gadol, because he was atoning for himself, for his family, and for all the people, as we read more than once that expression here in Acharei Mot, which means after the death of. If you'd like to really learn in tremendous detail with beautiful, beautiful illustrations about the service on Yom Kippur in the Holy Temple, you can go to our website, templeinstitute.org, and under Study Tools in the main menu, you'll see what's it called? High Holy Days, perhaps? What is it called? Let me just double check. Study Tools, High Holidays. And you'll see Yom Kippur. And you can learn about all the details. And again, even today, when we observe Yom Kippur in the synagogue and not in the Holy Temple, we still read about the entire part of the service. A big part of the service is reading about the entire service of the Kohen Gadol in the Holy Temple. So it's something that we we try to relive every year in our prayers, in our congregations. It must have been an amazing experience in the Holy Temple, because such drama, such anticipation, such focus on one individual. And the point isn't that the Kohen Gadol was a better person than other people, that he had a special qualities or contacts, or, he simply that basically each one of us in our own way is a Kohen Gadol, because it depends on each one of us. Any one of us who doesn't measure up, any one of us who doesn't try to do the best and be the best we can, we're letting our people down, we're letting one another down. So yeah, he was simply the individual who was given the task and had the responsibility to perform that task to the absolute best of his ability, and basically without error, because it had to be done just right. Following the long description of the service on Yom Kippur, which of course involved many offerings and the scapegoat, of course, and the Kohen Gadol had to immerse in the mikveh many times, and all sorts of dramatic moments. The Torah, the Parsha goes on to a different topic, and that topic is forbidden sexual relations. And it concludes with a long list of forbidden sexual relations. This also is something that we read on Yom Kippur because of its proximity to the description on Yom Kippur, and basically concludes saying you can't do any of these things because this is what the people who lived here did. The nations, the Canaanite nations that resided in Israel before the Israelite conquest, had become quite debased. They were basically satellite states of Egypt, and Egypt, as we know, was a place of impurity, a place of sexual depravity, and those depravities were also practiced amongst the Canaanite nations, and this is one of the reasons why their time was up in the land of Israel, because Hashem says, their iniquity has reached the point where they no longer have a standing here in the land of it. The land is rejecting them. The land of Israel rejects iniquity. It rejects impurity. It rejects sexual depravity. And God forbid Israel ever sinks into a state of such depravity, and it too will be spurned by the land. The land itself is holy. It is a living entity, and it's a reflection of Hashem's will. It's a reflection of where Hashem wants us to reside and where He wants to reside with us. So we need to be very, very serious and strict in adhering to a very high standard of sexual propriety. Of course, we're not talking about celibacy, God forbid, and we're only talking about forbidden relations, but of course relations between married couples are encouraged, and encouraged to be enjoyable and fruitful, and they are looked upon favorably and blessed. But forbidden relations they're bad. Don't do them. Don't do them. And know that doing them puts the entire nation in peril. Not a good thing. So that is basically the beginning and the end of the Parshat Acharei Mot. And it's followed next week by Parshat Kedoshim, which means holy ones. And sometimes when it's not a leap year, as it is this year, often years Acharei Mot and Kedoshim are read on the same Shabbat. And so it's referred to as Acharei Mot Kedoshim, which can be read as after the death of the holy ones, which would imply, would be referring then to Nadav and Avihu. In case you were wondering what their status was, despite the fact that they erred very grievously, and took liberties, as I said before, that they should not have, they are considered to have been righteous people who did what shouldn't have been done and paid a very, very high price for it. Also know that Kedoshim is a word that means holy ones, and it's a word used often also to refer to people who die sanctifying Hashem's name. You might refer to them as martyrs. And of course, the more than 1,200 Israelis who were killed on October 7th are all Kedoshim. They've all sanctified Hashem's name in their death, as have the hundreds of soldiers who have since fallen. And it's a very serious thing. And here in Israel, the Passover Seder was a very serious, we're sitting at the table and enjoying our freedom, but something's missing. People are missing. People who should be with their families, but aren't free. They're being held against their will, against the will of a nation, in a pit, in a dungeon in Gaza. And this was something that was on everybody's minds and hearts. And certain things were done, and everybody in their Seder did things in order to remember and to commemorate and to pray for their safety and their safe return. And I know that in many Seders across the world, many Jews also did symbolic things in order to remember and to show that their hearts and prayers are with those hostages, with their families, with their loved ones. And, this is the longest war Israel has ever engaged in, even longer than the War of Independence. We're used to quick wars. The 6-Day War, I guess, was one of the quickest. But I was just thinking that despite the fact that this war is more than half a year now, you might want to call it the one-day war, because we're still there. We're still back, if not on the 7th of October, on the 8th of October. And until this war is over and until we have won a conclusive victory, that day's not over yet. We still haven't finished that day. We have unfinished business that has taken a very long time, too long a time, I believe. But we need to get it done. And until we get it done, that day won't be over. The sun will not set on that day until we have vanquished our enemies. And we have lots of enemies. And they seem to be metastasizing, I'm not sure I said that right, all around the world, which is a very sad thing for the world. But we are an eternal nation, the nation of Israel. Hashem is our guardian and will not let us down. He did not let us down at the Sea of Reeds when it looked like there was no place to run, no place to go to. He pulled us through then. He'll pull us through again, as He always has and always will. Thank you so much for being with me. Temple Talk.